More Tales Told by a Dubliner by Turlough Conmee. Story number 13. The Revolt of the Lawnmowers. It was a long time since I'd been out in Ballyfingal on the outskirts of Dublin. I always knew it as a country village surrounded by green fields. But the times had changed and now it was a suburb. I was out here visiting me sister Linda, who had moved out here with her new husband. They'd bought a house in what you might describe as a middle-class housing estate. All these houses, as I noted, walking along the new street to Linda's house, had lawns front and back, and garages with space to park a car. It was an early spring evening, and the last of the sunlight lit up this suburban scene. As I walked by the well-trimmed lawns, I could see the occasional furtive movement there out of the corner of my eye. For some reason it seemed furtive. I soon realised what it was. It was lawn-mowing robots moving about. I had got used to seeing these in recent years, but there was always something odd about them that made me stop and look. The robot was always a grey thing with a flat top, so it blended in with the lawn or garden. The only thing that told you it was there was its movement. For indeed, the thing was never still. It trundled across the lawn in a straight line like a miniature tank on a battlefield. And then, when it was about to hit an obstacle, such as a tree or a wall, it would suddenly pull up short, rotate at a 45-degree angle, and start off in a straight line again, till it met another obstacle, at which point the manoeuvre would be repeated. The theory behind it, I reasoned, must be that the robot, if left to its own devices for an indefinite period, would eventually be able to mow the whole lawn. Though at what a rate of attrition I could hardly imagine. I mean, before it succeeded in mowing the whole lawn, it would cross and recross the strips it had already mown countless times. How inefficient, I thought. But these were mindless robots that never got tired, and the people who owned them seemed to go out to work during the day and leave them to run at the place. I always meant to axe one of them if the robot ever managed to mow the lawn completely, every inch of it, and if so, how long it took. I supposed that they could leave them at it all night, since they made no noise and wouldn't disturb their sleep or their neighbours for that matter. Come to think of it, that was one of the unsettling things about them, that they were absolutely silent. That was what made them look furtive. They moved silently in and out of the trees and bushes, and the only time you heard a sound from them was when they came close and then rotated to go in another direction. There might be a sort of a rattle then, but not much. Their silence made them seem relentless. One of the first ones I saw in action was in a big garden in Dublin, where the owner had several hens that had the run of the lawn. They would sit quietly and take a nap in the sun when they weren't aimlessly pecking at the grass. But when the new robot lawnmower approached, they would resignedly decamp and go elsewhere. They knew this strange animal would not swerve to avoid them. Now I was walking through the new suburb of Ballyfingal, and these robots were on most of the lawns, silently at their labour. They seemed to have caught on and become a status symbol here. I paused at a driveway where I saw a strange sight. There was a shiny new car parked on the concrete in front of the garage and the house. But it was the movement there that attracted my attention. On the ground was a lawn mowing robot, and it was doggedly butting the wheels of the parked car, for all the world like a goat trying to beat down a gate with its horns. The robot hit the car tyres and there was a bump. Then it reversed a few feet and charged the car again. It had clearly escaped from a nearby lawn and looked completely disoriented, except that there was a determination, almost a ferocity, to its repeated headbutts. They were impressive. I stood looking at the spectacle for a long time, till I realised that I wasn't the only one looking. There was a little red-haired boy of about 7 watching it from the neighbour's garden. He stood quite close. We looked at one another. "Isn't that a queer one?" I said to him, not knowing really what to say. "What do you make of it?" After a moment's hesitation, the little boy said, "It's them lawnmowers. They're getting smarter all the time. I watch them," he added. "Smarter?" I said. "In what way?" "They learn things," he said, and shrugged. "Like what?" "Well," said the young philosopher, "first they had to learn to mow the lawn. They did that. But then they started learning other things." "Other things?" "Yeah," he said earnestly. "Like how to escape from the lawn if there's a way out. They find it. And then the butt things, like that fella there." He pointed at the lawnmower, still doggedly butting the tyres of the parked car. "I seen them knock over flower pots. I seen them sidle up to a dog or a cat that's lying asleep in the sun and give them a whack. You see, they always used to stop before they hit anything and turn away. Now they don't." "Robots on the rampage," I chuckled. "Is that it? And who do you think is behind all of this?" "No one," he said solemnly. "They're doing it all themselves." "Peacock," says I. "That's a queer one, all right." "They keep learning new tricks," he went on. Then looking away shyly, he said, Some of them have learned to fly." "Go with that," says I. "I'm not joking you," he continued earnestly. "Look." And he pointed upwards into the sky, which was now turning to dusk. As he spoke, I could hear a faint engine sound that grew gradually louder. I looked up where he pointed, and sure enough, there was a black speck in the evening sky, with a flashing red light. It hovered above the ground at about 100 or 200 feet, and then it dropped and moved sideways and hovered again. Behind me, I heard a woman's voice calling from a neighbouring house. "Seamus, come in for your tea." Ignoring this, I stayed staring at the flying object. Then I turned to look for the little red-haired boy, saying, "It's a..." But the little boy was already gone. Now, when I got to my sister's new house, which was just around the corner, and told her about the lawnmower and the little boy, she just said, "That young Seamus Dorkin is an awful young blatherskite. He'll tell you anything if he thinks you'll listen to it." A few weeks later, I was back on another visit. Walking down the new street on a fine spring evening, I saw the little red-haired boy in his front garden. I stopped. "Well," says I, "are the lawnmowers behaving themselves since I was here last?" He shook his head. "They're getting worse," he said. "In what way?" I asked. "They're lying in ambush for passing cars," he said to me. "Groups of them. They sit still on the lawns or in the driveways, and when a car comes driving along the road, they rush out and attack it." "How do they do that?" I asked. "They bump into the wheels on both sides of the car and try to make it stop, just like they used to bump the wheels of parked cars." "And what did the drivers do? It must bother them, give them a bit of a gunk to be attacked on all sides by lawnmowers." He shook his head. "They just speed up a bit and drive on. You see, They really can't do any damage to the car. Not yet, he added darkly. They're just practicing. I said. Is there anything else they're doing? There is, said the boy, nodding his head vigorously. They're starting to chase dogs and cats. Go on with that, says I. It's true, the little boy said. Me and me sister have seen it. 2 or 3 of them will approach an animal that's asleep in the sun. One of them will bump them so they wake up. The dog or the cat runs away. Then the lawnmowers chase after them. They're getting faster than they ever were on a lawn, I can tell you. But the dogs and cats can still outrun them. Sometimes a dog will try to turn and fight, but after he gets a few bumps, he takes to his heels again. Mara and me had to go out and rescue our dog Butch. He's a big lab retriever, and he's always one for chasing cats. But these lawnmowers got the better of him. They had him surrounded in the driveway, and the howling of him was something awful to hear. We ran out to see what was wrong. So what did yous do? Mara got a broom from the garage, and she gave me a rake, and the 2 of us started beating the lawnmowers on their backs with them as hard as we could. Pecod, I think I left a few scratches on one of them. Anyway, they soon dispersed in all directions. Did you tell your parents about this? We did. And what did they say? They didn't believe us. They said we were exaggerating. What about the dog? He's afraid to go outside the house now. We do have to take him outside to do his business. We stand guard over him like. So what do you and your sister make of all this? Mara says there's a plan behind it. Someone is leading them, training them to speed up and attack cars, dogs and cats. She doesn't know who or what it is yet, but she says they're up to something and they're all in it together. You mean, I said, to take over the world? The little boy shrugged his shoulders. At least to take over Ballyfingal, he said. When I got to Linda's house and told her all I had heard, there was the same scornful reaction. I don't know what it is with them Dorkin kids, she said. They've made up a whole story between them. I didn't pursue the matter in the face of such scepticism. But later on in the evening, there was an event that gave us both pause. As it was dark already, Linda decided to drive me to the station so that I could catch a train into town. We got into her car and drove around the corner, down the road where the Dorkins lived. After a while, we both heard a loud bump. Then there was another bump, and another, and the car shuddered with all the impacts. Linda drove on, muttering a few curses under her breath. You see, I told her, it's them lawnmowers. She soon pulled up at the station. Maybe the lawnmowers are getting out of the gardens and cruising around at random. People should be warned to keep them penned in. And then she said, safe home. You too, I said. On my next visit to Ballyfingal, I passed the Dorkins' house as usual, and there in the front garden was little red-haired Seamus and an older girl of about 12, whom I took to be Mara. They both looked up as I passed. I saw the lawnmowers in action the last night I was here, I told them. A few of them ambushed the sister's car. We got a queer gunk, I may tell you, but they couldn't do us any harm. They're getting ready for something big, said young Seamus darkly. And now we know who's leading them, don't we, Mara? Mara looked suspiciously at me and then inquiringly at her brother. He nodded. He knows, Seamus said. I told him. So Mara said to me now, there's a lawnmower that leads them. We call him Big Robot. That's because he's bigger and darker than the other ones. Bigger and darker than any lawnmower we've ever seen. She shivered. We don't know where he lives, but it's around here somewhere. I don't think it could be a house. Maybe somewhere out in the fields beyond the estate. He must have escaped and lived on his own, so he could reprogram himself and develop new powers. Somehow he's found out how to contact other lawnmowers and establish control over them so that they obey him. He's programming them to be aggressive and attack targets and not just mow lawns. Have you talked to your parents about this? I asked. Maura shook her head fiercely. My dad grew up out here, on a farm, as it was then. He says this business of lawnmowers is just a lot of codology. Anyone else? I told the teacher at school about it the other day. And what did she say? She said she was concerned and would do what she could to get me an appointment with the school psychologist. Then I can tell her the whole story. I see, says I. We're the only ones who can do it now, Maura said. The only ones who can stand and fight. We formed an army of local kids, said Seamus brightly. Haven't we, Maura? Maura is the leader, he explained. What will you do? I asked. I've seen Big Robot, said Maura, and so have a few of the other kids. We'll have to track him to his lair and fight it out with him. Hooray! Cheered Seamus. Down with Big Robot! We have our plans laid, said Maura. All the kids are on the lookout for Big Robot or suspicious movements of the other lawnmowers. I have a signal arranged with all the kids. It's a whistled SOS. When they hear that, they'll all tumble out of bed, slip out of their houses, and assemble on the road here. Then we'll attack. What will you fight them with? I asked. My dad's got a hunting rifle and a shotgun. He loves to go out hunting in the woods. Last time he took me with him. He showed me how to shoot. He says I have a pretty good aim. Mum doesn't know. Anyway, we'll bring the rifle and the shotgun and Dad's ammunition. Apart from that, the local kids are to come with garden tools, rakes, broomsticks and hurleys. The younger ones are to fire stones at them if it comes to a battle. I've got me hurley, said Seamus. When they get a whack of that, they'll turn and scuttle. Well, good luck to yous, I told them. It'll be the Battle of Ballyfingal, be the sound of it. Just then, there was an engine sound in the sky overhead, and a dark shape flew over, its red light flashing. We'll have to deal with him too, said Maura darkly. Luckily there's only one of them that can fly, as we found out. Big Robot sends him out on aerial reconnaissance when it gets dark. I don't know if he has any firepower, but we'll have to knock him out. And we will. Hooray! Cried Seamus again. Victory to the Ballyfingal army! When I got to my sister's house, I didn't repeat what I'd heard from the Dorkin kids. I felt I had been let in on a military secret, so discretion was called for. Linda had other concerns to report. Her dog had limped home with an injured back leg and several bruises. Some young hooligans must have attacked him, she said, or else he must have had a run-in with a pack of wild dogs out in the fields. Meanwhile, the cat had disappeared for a fortnight, and just as she was despairing of it, appeared never again, thinking it had been run over by a car. It slunk home, bedraggled, and with a look of terror in its eyes. It was a few weeks before my next visit to Ballyfingal, and as I walked up from the station along the road past the Dorkin's house, the sun was shining warmly and the blackbirds were singing from the housetops. There were Maura and Seamus in their front garden. I stopped, consumed with curiosity. "Well," I said to them, "everything under control, or not?" They both nodded. Little Seamus told me, "We fought the Battle of Ballyfingal and won. Big Robot is no more." Then he looked at his sister. "Tell him about it, Maura." So now Maura told me the whole story. "One night," she said quietly and deliberately, "the kids noticed suspicious movements. Just as darkness fell, columns of lawnmower robots were seen advancing along the roads. They were going somewhere. I said I'd follow them to wherever they were going and then report back. All the kids were to be ready for the signal. So I followed them robots. They were all going to the same place, all right. That was how I found Big Robot's lair. It turned out to be Murphy's barn. That's an old disused barn where the Murphys once had their farm. My dad remembers it from when he was growing up here. I watched them all trundle into the barn, one after another. When I'd seen enough, I ran back home and told Seamus to bring out Dad's rifle and shotgun and his ammunition. While he was doing that, I went around the estate and gave the SOS signal to the kids as they slept in their beds. So soon they were all converging on the road outside our house. They came armed with rakes, hurleys and whatever they had. I took Dad's rifle and slung his ammunition pouch around me, and Seamus followed with the shotgun. And so we all moved off, heading for Murphy's barn. When we got there were lights inside the barn, but the big door was closed. We crept up to the door unchallenged, and all we could hear was a kind of mechanical humming and clicking inside. On a signal, we threw wide the barn door, and what a sight we saw. Big Robot was in front, on a raised wooden platform, and all the other lawnmowers were positioned in rows in front of him, just like a school class. There was a rumble from Big Robot, and his lights flashed, and I realised that he was reprogramming them, giving them new commands about fighting and destroying. We had come in the nick of time. Then Big Robot turned and looked at us. His humming grew louder, and his lights flashed angrily. The masked lawnmowers turned too and advanced on us. We retreated out the door, and I told all the kids to regroup in the shadow of the trees outside. Then out came the lawnmowers, and after them Big Robot, flashing his orders. Just then, I heard the flying robot overhead. I looked up and saw him. He was reporting on our strength to Big Robot. I called for the shotgun, loaded it, raised it upwards, aimed, and gave him both barrels. He burst into flames and fell to earth. Now Big Robot gave the order to attack, and the robots surged forward. We ran forward to meet them. The tide of battle went back and forth, I may tell you. Sometimes the kids beat the lawnmowers back with fierce blows from their rakes and hurleys, and volleys of stones from the younger ones. Sometimes the lawnmowers kept on and broke our ranks, and sent us fleeing with sore shins and ankles, and howls of pain. I was beginning to despair of us winning, but then I realised that the enemy was not the lawnmowers, but Big Robot himself. He was the one who had to go. So calling Seamus to bring the hunting rifle and the ammo, I loaded it and knelt down on the edge of the clearing to take aim. Big Robot was an easy target because he was trundling up and down the farmyard, rallying his troops, lights flashing fiercely. I tracked his movements for a while. Then I let him have it. The first shot seemed to bounce off. I'd hit someplace on his armour. But the second shot went home. He stopped in his tracks, and then something exploded inside him. Flames and sparks were shooting out of him, and he toppled over on one side. Then there was confusion among the masked lawnmowers. They stopped attacking and just started circling aimlessly and bumping into one another. At that, I gave the signal for retreat. We all went home. The rifle, the shotgun and the ammo were stored away so that Dad wouldn't know they had been used. Him and me mam would have had a fit if they knew. Anyway, a few of the older kids stayed with us, just kind of talking about the battle. At dawn, we went back to Murphy's barnyard, me and Seamus and all the kids who were with us. There was Kevin, Nola, Patricia, Donal and Ciara. It was a scene of carnage, you might say. All that was left of Big Robot was a charred heap lying in the middle of the barnyard. The other lawnmowers seemed to be massed in a circle around him. We were ready to flee if they tried anything, I may tell you. But after a while, 6 of them moved forward, 2 from each side and 1 each from the front and back, and between the 6 of them, they managed to hoist Big Robot on their backs. Then they moved slowly forward. The robots followed in single file. It was a funeral procession. We fell in at the back and followed them. It seemed like the right thing to do. The procession wound its way across the farmyard, around the side of the barn, and out into a nearby field, where there was a big hole dug that had once been used as a manure tip. The robots paused on the edge with the blackened shell of Big Robot. Then they seemed to heave together and pitched him down into the hole. The lawnmowers were motionless for a time around the pit, as if they were standing to attention. If I'd had me dad's rifle still, I would have fired a volley over the grave. As it was, the kids who were wearing baseball caps took them off as a sign of respect. After a while, I nodded to the others and we filed out of Murphy's barnyard to go home. I looked back once and I could see the lawnmowers dispersing now like a crowd coming out of a funeral mass. They were all heading back to the roads and lawns where they lived. Mara finished. Since then, all's quiet, little Seamus told me. Well, says I, that's one for the history books. The Battle of Murphy's Barn. Good on yous. As I walked on my way along the quiet suburban road, I saw children at play, mams and dads out gardening, and here and there a lawn-mowing robot, sedately trundling about its business. I found it hard to imagine things had ever been otherwise. You have been listening to The Revolt of the Lawnmowers by Turlough Conmee from More Tales Told by a Dubliner. Now, this is the 13th tale, the final tale in the series. I hope you have enjoyed them all. So good night now, and good luck to you.